49ers alarm update to wake you up here Friday morning. Bye week. It's remained busy, and you guys are going to like this one. Fred Warner, according to John Lynch, will push the limits in his playoff return bid. Yes. Fred Warner, we talked about this earlier this week. I was just speculating a little bit. I was doing some math in my head. I know 49ers history. I know NFL history. I know the abilities and the reputations of the greats in NFL history. Jerry Rice, one of them, he came back from an ACL tear in 16 weeks, in less than 4 months. And, well, Fred Warner, I would put him in the same category as a Jerry Rice, as a Terrell Owens. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's the transcendent talent. He's changed the game. Why not make a push to return in this 2025-2026 season? It was just speculation the other day, and it was based on Kyle Shanahan's initial spitball timeline. He said, 3 months. Well, early October, when Fred Warner suffered the dislocated ankle and the fractured ankle, we don't know how much ligament damage there was. That's obviously the big variable here that could be wild in this situation. But when that happened, I immediately did some math, and it came out to be 3 months, 13 weeks, 13 weeks was right around the time of the wild card round. So 14 weeks, divisional round. 15 weeks, NFC championship game. 16 weeks, that would be the Jerry Rice timeline in 1997 coming back from the ACL, would have been the bye before the Super Bowl. Well, 17 weeks would be the Super Bowl, which is at Levi's Stadium. And you think about Shanahan's 3-month timeline. You think about the fact that there have been some orthopedists. I know it's the guys on Twitter, so I don't, take it all that seriously. But there have been people who have talked about the 4-month window for Fred Warner based on what they know on the outside. And I said, well, if there's a guy who's going to push the limits, it'll be Fred Warner. If there's a guy who can successfully push the limits, it's going to be someone that they call the Predator, Fred Warner, right? I mean, he's got this size-speed combination that we've never seen at the linebacker position. So already he is somebody who has broken barriers, who has redefined what's possible from a physical and cerebral standpoint at the position. So why not redefine what's possible in a potential return from injury? If somebody like Jerry Rice did it in 97, if Terrell Owens came back from a broken leg in 7 weeks instead of 10 weeks in the Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles against the New England Patriots, and why wouldn't Fred Warner have that possibility? And today, the interview is going to drop later on, I think at 9 p.m. Pacific. John Lynch does it every week. It's his contractual interview with NBC Sports Bay Area. It's the one that Greg Papa typically hosts. This year, Matt Mayoko hosting for Greg. Our best wishes to Greg, who I've been texting with. I think he's still doing well. Going to check in on Greg now that I have reminded myself right after this show. But the interview is going to drop tonight. Matt Mayoko went ahead and leaked part of what he talked about with John Lynch during the interview, and Lynch said that Warner will indeed push the limits to try to make it back. Now, Lynch did say, and I have got to couch, this intriguing line, the push the limits line, I've got to couch it with the full context, and it's a little less optimistic, but he did say, I think it's outside the realm, and I promise you it's our duty with a player like Fred not to ever put himself in harm's way in terms of not being ready. So we'll follow the orders of the doctors. They'll control this, but Fred is going to push the limits, and he's doing everything possible. He lives in a hyperbaric chamber for 2-3 hours a day. He's here all the time at the team facility. He's unbelievable, this guy. It's what made him who he is. And that goes back to my initial point, that the fact that Fred Warner has already transcended so many limits, so many expectations, so many suppositions about the linebacker position, about a football player in general, as a 6'4" DB type who's become a middle linebacker. I mean, we've never seen what Fred Warner has done on the football field. That immediately puts him on the track of the Hall of Fame and the track of some of the greats who have found ways to return earlier. And just imagine, I mean, I know that I led my video with this the other day, but I'll say it again because let's just step back. Let's consider the fact that the 49ers are 9-4, that they have a 92% chance of making the playoffs. They're going to be fighting here for their division championship and the number 1 seed. If you want a rooting guide, let me know, and I'll make a rooting guide for this weekend while they're on their bye week. But just sit back and imagine the 49ers making the playoffs, maybe even having a home game, maybe even have 2 home games if they are able to get that 1 seed. I mean, the Rams are 9-3 and the 49ers are 9-4. The Rams just have to lose one more time, and if the 49ers win out, and I don't think anything's impossible with the level of QB play the 49ers are getting now, with the defense and how it's improved. The special teams is number 1 in the league. 49ers could get 2 home games in the NFC playoffs, and then there'd be a home game in the Super Bowl. What if Fred Warner is introduced as part of the 49ers starting lineup for any of those 3 games, with the most likely one being the final one, the Super Bowl at Levi Stadium, Super Bowl 60. Now, the NFC Championship game actually would, this is how the Super Bowl works. It'd be a more pro 49ers crowd at the NFC Championship game than at the Super Bowl because you've got more of a neutral crowd at the Super Bowl. But I'm sure that the Super Bowl in the Bay Area would still be a heavily pro Niners crowd complexion. Just imagine that place would shake in a way that it's never shaken before and probably would never shake again if Fred Warner were introduced as part of a 49er starting lineup this season. And, I hate to bring this into superstitious territory, but some of what the 49ers have had to fight through over the course of not just the Shanahan era, I think it goes back to the NFC Championship game at Seattle, where NaVorro Bowman shredded his ACL. 2013 season, January 2014. I mean, it has just been unreal with the bad injury luck for the 49ers. Statistically, it doesn't make sense. It's stretched through multiple different training staffs, multiple different coaching staffs. It seems to go back to that 2013 season when they did leave Candlestick Park. But we've sat here and looked at 49ers seasons where they've had, I think, clearly the best roster in football washed away by injuries. I still remember 2022 when Brock Purdy tore his elbow and they ran out of quarterbacks. I still remember this 2025 season because we're in it right now. And if the 49ers had Nick Bosa and Fred Warner available through this year, I think it'd be a slam dunk. I think the 49ers would be considered the best team in football. They're 9-4, even without them, even without Purdy for a month and a half. But maybe to finally overcome this injury hex, the 49ers will need an injury miracle, a recovery to break in their favor. Maybe that's what could bring everything full circle and set the world right for the 49ers. If Fred Warner was somehow, some way able to come back, even in a limited capacity, to close this season with the Super Bowl being back in the Bay Area, it's worth thinking about right now after what John Lynch said. Lynch, there's a few more comments from Lynch here in Matt's piece. Again, 9 p.m. tonight is when the actual video comes out, so we'll be able to see John Lynch talking about it, and I'm sure that we'll have a lot more information from John at that time. So they're going to follow the orders of doctors. If they don't clear Fred Warner, then they won't play him. But there is historical precedent of great players beating timelines, and Lynch is at least opening the door for that right now. He said, when you watch someone go through rehab, and Nick Bosa is very much the same way, when you watch him go out and attack the rehab, it speaks to who they are as players. Aside from their God-given talents, they have that will to be different and outperform any range that any doctor is going to give them. And it's kind of fun to watch. It makes me excited to have them a part of us. Now, before you ask about Nick Bosa, and I'm sure some of you in the comment section are, the answer there is no, because an ACL tear is different. And I'll go back to the Jerry Rice example for that as well. Yeah, Jerry, obviously special, greatest football player of all time. Tore his ACL week 1 at Tampa Bay, like Fred Warner, same stadium, 1997 season, and was back week 16 Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. But with Jerry, he re-injured himself week 16. And, reading what John Lynch is saying, the 49ers want to protect Fred Warner from a similar danger. They don't want him to rush back out there and just get hurt again. Now, it might be very, very hard to convince Fred that the risk is not acceptable, because if he does return this year, it's probably going to be at the very end. It probably wouldn't come until the 49ers made the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl at home. There might be a very hard, serious discussion between Fred Warner and the medical staff where Fred Warner says, you know what, this is my legacy. This is the Super Bowl. I accept the higher injury risk. And at that point, we'd be in uncharted territory. I mean, maybe the only comp would be Terrell Owens in that Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles against the New England Patriots, where Terrell Owens was 7 weeks removed from a broken leg. Doctors were saying it'd be 8 to 10 weeks. And he said, I'm ready to go sooner. And he was a special athlete, obviously. I think Terrell Owens is the second greatest receiver of all time. And he would have won Super Bowl MVP honors had the Eagles been able to pull it off against the New England Patriots. That's how good Terrell Owens was in that Super Bowl. So there may be a discussion along those lines. That's just me looking at this and looking at the timelines that doctors have casually put out, looking at what Lynch has said, and then realizing that Fred Warner is a special player and human being. And if there is that conflict there toward the end, then there may be that risk reward that Warner and doctors have to balance. And Warner himself might make a strong legacy push. I mean, all this kind of stuff, if you're just a football fan, should give you goosebumps. I mean, it almost feels scripted in a way, right? When you consider the stakes of what could happen. But the first thing that has to happen is that the 49ers have to put Fred Warner into the type of position to where that's even a decision that can be made. And that's why we talk about the 49ers surging right now. That's why we're going to talk about their rooting interests here over the course of the Week 14 bye. The 49ers are currently in that number 7 spot in the NFC playoffs. They will move up to at least number 6 this weekend. We can take a look at the standings right here. I know that the game last night was interesting. It didn't change the 49ers standing. Though I think that it was good for San Francisco because Detroit beating Dallas, first off, if you ever have a rooting interest and you have to ask me a question and the Cowboys are involved, let me look straight in the camera and say this. Anytime Dallas loses, it's good for the 49ers, regardless of other factors around it, okay? If you're new here, the Cowboys losing is good for the 49ers. You respect that rivalry because that was the greatest rivalry of all time, the 49ers and the Cowboys in the 1990s. I tweeted that yesterday. In case you don't follow me on X, then you watch me here. Cowboys losing last night, good for the 49ers. Sentimental reasons, but I think also for practical reasons because Dallas is now completely out of the picture. There's a minuscule chance that the Cowboys make the playoffs. However, the team that beat them, the Detroit Lions, they now have a little bit of a tailwind, and they play the Rams next week. As you can see in these standings, the 49ers are going to be able to hop over either Green Bay or Chicago because Green Bay and Chicago play each other on Sunday. The 49ers are going to be able to hop over Seattle because they play the Seahawks in Week 18. The 49ers already have a better record than the Bucs if you're talking about 1 seed aspirations. And the only reason the Bucs are ahead of them is because they're a division leader. The 49ers can hop over Philadelphia because they're already even in the loss column. Philadelphia also a division leader. The 49ers can hop over Chicago because they play Chicago on December 28th. So the only team that the 49ers can't control their own destiny to hop over is the Rams. They need the Rams to lose one more game. So who's going to help out the 49ers? Well, it could be Detroit. So you'd rather have Detroit with some wind at their sails, or the Seattle Seahawks can beat the Rams. Those are the two most realistic losses left on LA's schedule. So the way that I looked at the game last night was, well, Detroit, yes, they're on the 49ers tail, but I don't think they're hot on the 49ers tail. They're a game behind, but they don't have the tiebreaker over the 49ers. 49ers still have to take care of business. I think that you'd rather use Detroit as your weapon to take out the Rams, potentially. Now, they lost Brian Branch with a torn Achilles, so that makes it tougher for the Lions. I don't know what the opening spread for that LA game is, but they do have a longer week than the Rams do. The Rams have to play a division opponent in the Arizona Cardinals, and maybe the Arizona Cardinals have now been eliminated, so they've got nothing to lose. They can throw the kitchen sink at the Rams this weekend, and maybe the Cardinals get it done against LA. You never know in this league, right? I mean, it's one of those. Nobody expected the Carolina Panthers to beat the Rams last week, so it's one of those things where no game should be taken for granted. Not even the 49ers game against Tennessee in week 14, although we do have to operate with some sort of reasonable projection moving forward. And I think that when it comes to the 49ers, I don't anticipate them losing to Tennessee. I see Indianapolis, Chicago, Seattle being very, very tough games. That's going to be the best, most compelling 3-game stretch of the Kyle Shanahan regular season era. And I don't anticipate the Rams losing to teams like the Arizona Cardinals, like the Atlanta Falcons, but I can see the Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks giving them a real push. Those of you just joining us, the news this morning, Fred Warner is going to quote unquote push the limits in his playoff return bid. That is from John Lynch speaking on the 49ers GM/coach show that we hear every week on NBC Sports Bay Area. It's going to drop tonight at 9 p.m. So we're going to get more from John Lynch during that interview. I know that during the bye week, we don't have as much media availability, so there is a little less information coming out. But that's why we talk about rooting interests. That's why we break things down analytically. There's been a lot of cool stuff that has come out as far as 49ers tendencies. And, it's a good time. I'm working on it on the San Francisco Standard right now, a nice reset of the 49ers statistically, just to see where they're at. I did it after the Rams game, which was a Thursday night game in week 5 when they won down at SoFi. And I'm going to be doing a little bit more of it this week over the course of the next few days before the 49ers return in earnest to practice. They're going to have a bonus practice on Monday, but that's just a light session. I don't expect much out of that. They don't even have to have an injury report for that practice. It's Wednesday's practice where they really get back together, and we're going to figure out where they're at health wise. Maybe Yetur Gross-Matos back for San Francisco. That could all be good stuff for the 49ers. Speaking of Yetur Gross-Matos, and speaking of the 49ers pass rush, and speaking of what Robert Saleh has done for this football team this year, take a look at this. This is the 49ers, and compared to the rest of the league, when it comes to blitz rate and disguised coverage rate. 49ers are all the way over on the left. Blitz rate is on the x-axis of this graph. So the 49ers have the lowest blitz rate in the league. Look at the two coordinators with the lowest blitz rate in the league. Robert Saleh. And then I know DeMeco Ryans is not technically coordinating the Texans defense, but you know that he has massive influence in that Texans defense. He also has a very low blitz rate, the number 2 lowest blitz rate in the league. The difference between DeMeco Ryans and the Texans and the 49ers is that the Texans have got all pros up front. They've got Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter. We saw that defensive line when the 49ers went to Houston. San Francisco, meanwhile, well, they're getting better up front. They've added Cleveland Farrell. They added Keon White. They may add Yetur Gross-Matos, who's their best interior pass rusher. At least he was at the start of the year. Maybe Keon White is better than him. We could leave that up for debate. They're two different types of players, though. I do think that they fit a similar role, however. Yetur Gross-Matos a little bit longer of a frame. Keon White, just a little more suddenness to how he moves. There's some more, I think, length to power from Yetur Gross-Matos. And I think those two guys could be very complementary as far as outside in pass rushers go. But anyway, the fact that Saleh has trusted the structure of his defense without a lot of blitzes is very telling to me. He instead has focused on disguising coverages on the back end. And this is one area where Robert Saleh has evolved tremendously since his first tenure with the 49ers. It used to be fairly simple cover 3 for San Francisco, and they needed that supercharged pass rush in 2019 to just get after the quarterback. I know that they started mixing cover 4 in and quarters, and it wasn't the same as it was in 2017 and 2018 when it was the Seattle-style cover 3. But as far as coverage disguises went, they weren't operating at 42% like they are this year. Look who's at the top, by the way. The Carolina Panthers, who have intercepted Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford a combined 5 times over the course of the past 2 weeks. But the 49ers disguise coverages, but keep things generally in front of them without an aggressive blitz rate. The blitz rate for San Francisco is under 20% this year, the lowest in the league. There have been games where we've seen Robert Saleh bring the blitz at more intensity, but those generally have not been the successful 49ers games. I think the Rams game, they brought a lot of blitzes, but nothing worked there. I think they were desperate against the Rams. They were shorthanded defensively. They're playing one of the best offenses in all of football. And Saleh said, you know what, let's see what works. They didn't get much help early on from their offense because of a couple turnovers from the offense in the first quarter. If the 49ers were going to win that second Rams game, it was going to have to be a shootout in the high 30s. The offense only got to the high 20s, and as a result of the turnovers, the Rams offense got into the 40s. What did they lose, like 42-26 in that game against the Rams? But, generally outside of that, it hadn't been a very high blitz rate for the 49ers. It's been like Saleh from the first tenure with San Francisco, but the disguised coverage rate much higher than before. Just goes to show some of the sophistication of this 49ers defense. Now, what I will say is that the blitz rate or lack thereof, the low blitz rate for the 49ers, ties directly into some individual game strategies that we've seen. Some of the games have pushed it to more of an extreme than others. And it might be hard for some fans to understand what the 49ers are trying to accomplish defensively if they're focused on things through the lens of fantasy football. For example, they gave up 480 total yards against the Arizona Cardinals, but it was still a good defensive performance. Why? Well, because on a per-snap basis, Arizona was inefficient. 49ers were up, 35-10 entering the fourth quarter of that game. Like, it was, by every single objective, smart defensive metric, it was a good performance, but by the raw yardage given up, it wasn't a good defensive performance. It's why you have to look at smart numbers instead of fantasy football numbers. The 49ers intentionally let everything develop in front of them against Arizona. They were down to 3 healthy defensive ends. They realized that if they were too aggressive with their pass rush, they would be burned for too many explosive plays. So what they did is they cage rushed. They just tried to keep Jacoby Brissett in a cage, and they let the Cardinals complete 5 6-yard passes in front of them, knowing that if they didn't get beaten over the top, they would have chances to generate takeaways. And they had, 2 interceptions in that game that were complete game-changing plays. So they allowed, it was a tactical move, they allowed yardage from the Cardinals so as long as the yardage was not efficient. So as long as the yardage was not explosive. And that's why I keep on showing this blitz rate. They weren't sending extra rushers to try to disrupt Arizona because it would have risked an explosive play downfield. If you send an extra blitzer, then something is vacated on the back end, and then a 4-yard gain can turn into a 40-yard gain. Then all of a sudden, you start to lose control of the game. They figured they had a good enough offense and a good enough special teams, the 49ers, to grab control of that game, which they did with Sky Moore's return, with Brock Purdy throwing that to George Kittle coming off the canned play at the line of scrimmage on second down, and I think it was 2nd and 10 when that hit from Brock Purdy. But they figured that they had enough in the tank there to where defensively, if they just sagged back with the blitz, not back with the coverage. If they sag back with the blitz and disguise their coverages, they would be able to take the air out of the football game 4 yards at a time. Time would roll off the clock for the Cardinals, and the 49ers already had the lead, and then they'd be able to pounce with some of those disguised coverages on a couple of those Jacoby Brissett throws and deliver interceptions. The reason I bring up this example and the reason I bring up that statistic is this is the genius of Robert Saleh this year. He has realized that he doesn't have to appease people who only care about yardage, people who only care about fantasy football. He just needs to win games. And he's realized that he has a shorthanded cupboard to work with. And in order to get to his goal of winning games and improving this defense, letting the young guys develop, he's probably going to have to give up a little bit on the stat sheet and the box score. But efficiency always matters a whole lot more than just those raw numbers. The 49ers this year has been all about winning at very pivotal, high leverage junctures. So if you can win in the red zone, it doesn't matter if you give up a 60-yard drive because you only gave up 3 points. If you can win in the turnover department, and this is something the 49ers actually struggled with for a lot of the year, but have gotten a lot better now because they finally have started registering interceptions and takeaways. And, early in the year, they got 4th down stops, which is the equivalent of a takeaway. But if you can win with the interceptions, with the forced fumbles and fumble recoveries and the key 4th down stops, then you can also bleed yardage because you've still won and changed possession at very important points. It's like work smarter, not harder. Because I think at some point with the personnel losses the 49ers have had, and this began with them turning over the roster anyway to younger players, a lot of draft picks on this team, with the cards that they were working with this year, working harder wasn't even possible at some point, right? You weren't going to overwhelm opposing offenses. So you have to work smarter and you have to deliver at those high leverage junctures. And that's what the 49ers have done to put themselves into the position where they are at now. All right, I'm going to answer some questions here. It's a beautiful Friday. Interesting quote from John Lynch on Fred Warner. And somebody's saying, I have heard that Bosa, Warner, and Williams have all come back to play poker in the locker room. I don't know about poker. I know that they have played poker in that locker room in the past. I've seen Bosa and Fred Warner back in the locker room. I haven't seen Mike Kell yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's been around there just when I haven't been there. It was really fun to talk to about the game of football. Well, all 3 of those guys, but Mykel Williams, he's been a joy to have around that locker room this year. He gets it. And a lot of fans and a lot of analysts didn't understand the Mykel Williams pick. That was about run defense first. That was about setting the edge so the 49ers could earn the right to rush the passer. And Mykel can rush from the inside. And it's so cool to talk to a rookie who understands the big picture of football like he does, because the 49ers have had to go about this in a very, very refined analytical way where they said, we're not just going to try to overwhelm people with sacks and pressures because we have other things to fix first. We can't build a fancy house without drilling into bedrock first, because otherwise, right now we're working on landfill. We're working on quicksand. The run defense ranked number 29 in the league last year. They couldn't set the edge. They got killed by crack toss over and over again. They couldn't defend against duo on the inside either. I mean, the entire run defense was broken under Nick Sorensen. And I think that the damage started under Steve Wilks in 2023. Personnel-wise, the 49ers needed to reload for Robert Saleh. So they said, we're going to get a couple big, strong defensive tackles that will be able to manhandle double teams, set things up for the linebackers to flow behind them so we stop getting beaten by duo over and over again. So that there comes Alfred Collins, there comes CJ West. And before that, they said, well, we need a guy who can also set an edge opposite Nick Bosa. That's why they signed Mykel Williams. It was so important to get Clelin Ferrell, even though this was before Williams got hurt. Ferrell and Williams both shared the field against the New York Giants. That's when Williams got hurt at MetLife Stadium. But Clelin Ferrell set a great edge for the 49ers back in 2023. When they lost him, that run defense fell off a cliff in the postseason when Clelin Ferrell got hurt. Remember what the Detroit Lions did to the 49ers. So They went out and they targeted players who could fix the run defense issue, knowing that if you can't stop the run, you're never going to be able to pin your ears back and rush the passer. And everybody's like, "Oh, where are all the sacks for Mykel Williams?" Like, even in college, they're like, "This he doesn't have enough sacks for me. He's not a developed pass rusher." That's not the point. It doesn't matter how good your pass rush is if the other team is just going to be able to run down the field on you, right? So the 49ers are now a top 10 run defense. I think they're number 9. They've moved up 20 spots, even though they've lost name recognizable talent like Leonard Floyd, like Malik Collins, who unfortunately got hurt for the Cleveland Browns, and the 49ers players, a lot of them walked up and offered their best to Malik Collins before he was carted off the field on Sunday. But they lost guys like that. They added rookies without great pass rushing resumes in college, but they've gotten better as a run defense, a lot better. And that's been key one for the 49ers to have 9 wins now instead of 6 wins throughout the entire season last year. Like the run defense has lost control of football games. Now, there are other things that have made the 49ers better despite these injuries, which is wild. Special teams from number 32 to number 1. That's huge. Brock Purdy, augmented by Mac Jones, QB2, way better than it was last year. And Kyle Shanahan is putting on an absolute coaching clinic. I mean, I think he should be the favorite for the coach of the year. They've got the most wins in the NFC. I know that these awards should not be taken seriously. And I know that these awards are just about the hottest flavor of the month. So right now, it's going to be Mike Vrabel. That's going to be Ben Johnson. Both of those guys are doing awesome jobs. But with either of those two coaches have their teams at 9-4, if they had half the injuries of the 49ers. I mean, forget about injury equivalent. I mean, just imagine the Patriots without Drake May, who's been the most efficient quarterback in football this year. Imagine them without Drake May for 6 or 7 weeks. Imagine that's just one injury, right? And that's what the 49ers have missed. But then imagine them without some of their best defensive players, like their 2 best defensive players and their best receiver. They wouldn't be where they are right now, 10 or 11 wins, right? The Chicago Bears, they don't have a good quarterback to begin with. Caleb Williams has struggled. They've got a really good running offense, but the injury equivalent for the Bears would be start decimating that offensive line, which is a strong suit of that football team. Defensively, it's been a really interesting team. I mean, the Bears might be the one who, it's funny because they're starting to improve, but their record might be overinflated because of ease of schedule. They've only beaten 2 winning teams, I believe, this year. They're going to have a chance to beat more. They've got the 49ers on December 28th. But if you took some firepower out of that Bears defense, they wouldn't have 26 takeaways. And they lead the league with those 26 takeaways. So and they wouldn't be at 9 wins. So the fact that the 49ers are at 9 wins, despite all this lost firepower, is certifiably insane. And I think Kyle Shanahan deserves some more respect for that. I'm ready to answer some questions. I got to drink some coffee. I just see people arguing about the NFC Championship game. Any update on Kyle Juszczyk? I know that Kyle Juszczyk is spending his bye week in Montana with his wife, and it's snowing quite heavily. It looks like they rented a cabin out in Montana. Shout out to Mark Major. He's a listener of the channel, viewer of the channel, I guess. He's got a spot up in Whitefish, Montana, and he actually invited us out there last year, and we went out there in April. It was awesome. Eddie DeBartolo has a spot out in Whitefish, Montana. It's actually where Dwight Clark is buried, out on the Eddie DeBartolo Ranch near the Candlestick goalpost from January 10th, 1982, the NFC Championship game. Clark's burial site is the same exact distance from that goalpost, which is out there in Montana on the DeBartolo property, as where Clark made the catch relative to the goalpost at Candlestick. Anyway, we were out there, and Awesome town, Whitefish, Montana. Really, really cool place. Amazing ski resort. And I don't know where Kyle Juszczyk is in Montana. It's a big state. I would highly recommend visiting Montana. Really, really good experience up there. And it looked like he's in a cool cabin, and it looks like it's absolutely dumping snow in Montana. Here's the thing about the training staffs. The 49ers have already changed training staffs. This injury situation goes through like 3 training staffs, right? Because they had the Harbaugh regime back in 2013 when all this started. I mean, they were just scourged by injuries. Then they had a different one with Kyle Shanahan and the start of that tenure. They changed training staffs in 2019. The Ben Peterson, who came in 2019, left. And now they have his former assistants are running it for the 49ers. They've been through multiple training staffs, and these injuries have still happened. So that's the solution that fans always, want to yell about. Hey, just change the training staff. They have. They have, and this is still happening to the 49ers, and it's happened through multiple coaching staffs as well for San Francisco, which is, I think, why some people have started to go to the superstitious reasons. Some of the reasons outside of rational thinking. And maybe, just maybe, Fred Warner returning miraculously quickly. He's going to push the limits trying to do so. Maybe that's what's going to be what ends this 49ers injury hex that has obviously derailed multiple bids at championships. But even the wild injury wave of 2025 has not derailed their 2025 bid at a Super Bowl, which I think is insane. And I think is worth our full attention and our full coverage. We got people calling it the candlestick curse. Maybe. I don't know. I'm looking for every explanation possible. Wow, Penn State is in the final stages of negotiations to make Matt Campbell its new coach. Sources tell Yahoo Sports. Matt Campbell was Brock Purdy's college coach at Iowa State. Did a hell of a job building up that program. Been there for quite a while. I got to go see Iowa State, and I got to go visit with Matt Campbell and his staff there, and they showed me so much of the exact spots where Brock Purdy developed a lot of the skills that we see at the NFL level now. It was really, really cool to see. And it sounds like Matt Campbell is going to be headed to Penn State. So congratulations to him. And an end of an era at Iowa State. One of the I think Alex Golesh is his name. He was one of the main recruiting people at Iowa State under Matt Campbell. He got hired to be the head coach of Auburn. So, Brock Purdy was a transcendent player that changed Iowa State's program and obviously changed the career prospects of a lot of the coaches and a lot of the staff members at Iowa State. The 4 years that Purdy put in at Iowa State benefited a whole heck of a lot of people. The time that Purdy has put in with the 49ers has benefited a whole heck of a lot of people. That seems to be a common trend. Wherever Purdy goes, people are happy that he's associated with their program. Maybe some people should take notes about that. Some people on the outside should take notes about that. Congratulations to Matt Campbell. Yes, rooting guide is going to be coming. I'll prepare a good one. That's going to be probably our next video. Maybe tomorrow morning's video. I'm flying somewhere. Surprise destination tomorrow morning. All guesses are welcome. Let me know where you think I'm going tomorrow morning. Yeah, I don't think that Fred Warner would be back for the start of the playoffs if he comes back. I mean, it sounds like a long shot, but it's worth talking about because even John Lynch is talking about it now. But, I mean, remember that the start of the playoffs, the wild card round would be 13 weeks from the time of injury. The three-month window would be right around that time. But that was only something that Kyle Shanahan said offhand right after the injury. He said, yeah, about 3 months. And that might have even been before an MRI. We don't know what the ligament damage, the extent of ligament damage is, which is, I think, the big variable here that needs to be answered. And we probably won't ever know from the outside. I mean, there's no reason for us to pry into Fred Warner's medical files here. Those are private, but some doctors online have said 4 months, which would be about the time of the NFC Championship game / Super Bowl. If Fred Warner defies the timeline, as John Lynch said he is trying to do, you would think that somewhere toward the back end of that 4-month window would be the only plausible chance to return. So I would say NFC Championship or Super Bowl. And just so happens that both of those games could be at the same spot, could be at Levi Stadium. We know for sure that the Super Bowl is going to be at Levi Stadium. Question is, where's that NFC Championship game going to be? So we're going to wait to see over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks where the 49ers end up. 92% chance to make the playoffs for San Francisco. But then it's about where the 49ers end up seated. If you can get to that 1 seed, which is not out of the question for the 49ers, they've got a higher chance of the 1 seed than they do of missing the playoffs right now. So if you can get to that 1 seed, you essentially win a playoff game. You don't have to play the first round. That's huge because guys don't get hurt when they're not playing. Then you also get to host at least the divisional. If you win the divisional round, you get to host 2 games, but you host at least the divisional round. And then you got the championship round. So it would be all 3 games, assuming you keep on winning, you'd have all 3 games at Levi Stadium. Every single time that the 49ers have been the 1 seed under Kyle Shanahan, they have made the Super Bowl. 2019 and 2023. Every single time they made the playoffs and not been the 1 seed, they've made it to the NFC Championship game, but they've lost there. It's not an accident. They had a lot more in the tank when they were the 1 seed to push through in the NFC Championship game. Kyler Murray is not expected to play again this season. He's not progressing as hoped. That's what Jonathan Gannon said. That might indeed be the last that we see Kyler Murray with Arizona. I don't think that they're all too thrilled with Kyler Murray in an Arizona Cardinals uniform. So Arizona likely turning the page after this season. We will not see Murray anymore. Still Jacoby Brissett action with the Cardinals. They will try to beat the Rams when they play them. I think they play the Seahawks too. I don't see that happening. So Arizona, the one team that, they had higher hopes for this year. They tried to load up defensively. They got Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell, but they were never strong enough at that QB position to be serious contenders offensively. And then when they lost James Conner against the 49ers in the game they lost to Mac Jones, that was it for the Arizona Cardinals. And Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't been good, Mike points out. Part of that is he hasn't had very good quarterback play. I mean, even with Kyler in there, Kyler's never been more than a number 10 efficiency guy, generally been middle of the pack. I mean, he has not been a transcendent player for Arizona. Let's go with some questions. Jerry Rice did come back early, but he did get hurt again. That's such a complicated story in 97 because I think the 49ers had their best team in the salary cap era, like post that 94 team was in 97, because I mean, they already had Terrell Owens, they had Rice, they had J.J. Stokes, they still had Garrison Hurst and a run game in 97. They had a great defense. They had the number one defense in the whole league. Jerry tore his ACL week 1 at Tampa, was back week 16. Monday Night Football, they beat the Broncos 34-17. The Broncos ended up winning the Super Bowl and beating the Packers, who beat the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. Jerry caught a touchdown in that 34-17 win over the Broncos, but cracked his kneecap, his patella, and that was it. He obviously did not come back that season anymore. And they really missed Jerry Rice against the Packers. In a way, you know, the Niners this year don't have a top defense, but you fear the same kind of fate for this 49ers team as the 97 Niners, because the 97 Niners were one receiver short in the playoffs because Rice got hurt. The Niners right here, I think they're one top receiver short of being fully stocked offensively because of the whole Brandon Ayuk situation. That's so unfortunate for San Francisco. So how do you work through it? I mean, you hope that Brock Purdy and his elite sack escape ability and Christian McCaffrey and what they're getting from George Kittle at tight end, you hope those guys can pick up the slack, but it's undeniably a tougher uphill road for the 49ers without Brandon Ayuk, without that top wideout. You hope that Ricky Pearsall can get back into form that he saw before the knee injury. He's more of a rhythm receiver, right? And it seemed that a great training camp carried over into the first 4 weeks, but it seems that that's been derailed for Ricky Pearsall. So you hope that he gets back into it. But I look at parallels between the past and now, and I see that as one danger spot where the 49ers may not be able to milk absolutely everything that this offense would be capable of if it just had that one more body at receiver, that one more separator. That's the one metric that the 49ers are a bit short at, is separation. They're still in the 20s when it comes to separation, average separation at the time of catch or incompletion. What are my thoughts on the Tavita Pritchard hire at Stanford? Well, my former classmate at Stanford. I was at Stanford at the same time as Tavita Pritchard and Andrew Luck. So it was a bit trippy to see both of them up there at that press conference. It's two guys I went to school with, coach and GM of Stanford football. I guess it means I'm getting older now that the coach and the GM of Stanford football, one's older than me. Tavita's 38, and Andrew Luck, I think, is 2 years younger than me. Those guys up there. I'm 37. So I think Andrew's 35 and Tavita's 38. But it's going to be fascinating because Tavita Pritchard was on Stanford's staff for a long time after he was the player. And that's back when Stanford was running all power and all those different concepts. Then he went to the NFL where he worked under Cliff Kingsbury and he got some air raid concepts. So he's going to be able to meld both of those. And it's going to be fascinating to see Andrew Luck spearheading recruiting. Stanford has got a whole bunch of money. They got a huge donation recently, like tens and tens of millions of dollars. Tavita Pritchard, has he evolved as a coach? I always thought he'd be a great coach just because he was a QB. And the first game I ever announced at Stanford on the road, my first road game as the student radio announcer, was the biggest upset in college football history at USC. And that's when Tavita Pritchard was the starting quarterback. And Stanford won 24-23 over Pete Carroll. Jim Harbaugh over Pete Carroll, with Tavita Pritchard being the quarterback, the shocking starting quarterback. Their starter had gotten a seizure that week, and Pritchard came in and led them to that touchdown drive at the Coliseum. But he got replaced by Andrew Luck a couple years later once Andrew had finished his redshirt year, because you knew that Tavita Pritchard wasn't going to be an NFL guy. You knew that Andrew Luck physically had a much higher ceiling. And you always said, well, Tavita could be a really good coach. It's usually those guys who are good enough to play, but not good enough to be true greats, who could see the game from a coach's point of view. And that's exactly who Tavita is. I think Andrew Luck is a perfect GM because he brings celebrity drawing power to Stanford, and they've got some money to pay guys now. So I think the future is bright for Stanford football. It was cool to see Washington respond the way that they did, the Washington players, when Tavita Pritchard was named the Stanford head coach. All right, guys, I got to get going. We'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks for watching. Fred Warner will push the limits in his playoff return bid. Crazy. buckle up. It's about to be a fun few months.